Hello and welcome back to Psych Ed. This is the third video in the Freudian psychoanalytic series, and this video will be focusing on the psychosexual stages of development. Now, Freud argued that to be psychologically healthy, we must successfully complete each stage of our psychosexual development. And if we don't, mental abnormality can occur if a stage is not completed successfully and the person becomes fixated in a particular stage. This particular theory shows how an adult personality is determined by the experiences of our childhood. For instance, in the highly repressive Victorian society in which Freud lived and worked, women in particular were forced to repress their sexual needs, and in many cases the result was some form of neurotic illness. Freud sought to understand the nature and variety of these illnesses by retracing the sexual history of his patients. This was not an investigation into sexual experiences per se, but far more important than the experiences were the patient's wishes and desires, their experience of love, hate, shame, guilt, and fear, and how they handled these powerful emotions. Now, if you remember in the first video we did in Freud's theories, we talked about how these painful and traumatic experiences were pushed down into our unconscious, where they affected our behavior, but we weren't consciously aware of them. Freud believed that children are born with a libido, a sexual pleasure urge, and there are a number of stages in childhood during which the child seeks pleasure via their libido from a different object. In the first stage, which is from the child's birth to up to a year old, is the oral stage. In the first stage of psychosexual development, the libido is centered in a baby's mouth. During the oral stages, the baby gets much satisfaction from putting all sorts of things in its mouth to satisfy the libido, as well as the demands of the id. At this stage in life, the oral demands are mouth-oriented, such as sucking, biting, and breastfeeding. Freud said that oral stimulation could lead to an oral fixation later in life. And we see oral personalities all around us, such as smokers, nail biters, finger chewers, and thumb suckers. Oral personalities engage in oral behaviors, particularly when under stress. The next stage is the anal stage, from 1 year to 3 years. During the anal stage of psychosexual development, the libido becomes focused on the anus. Therefore, it's called the anal stage, and the child derives great pleasure from defecating. Now remember, these are all just Freud's theories, so it's not necessarily factual, but this is what Freud thought impacted our psychological development. So within the anal stage, the child is now fully aware that they are a person in their own right, and that their wishes can bring them into conflict with the demands of the outside world, i.e., their ego has begun to develop, or has developed during this stage. Freud believed that this type of conflict, so the inner desires versus the demands of the outside world, tend to come to a head during a potty training. So when a child learns to use a toilet. During potty training, adults impose restrictions on when and where the child can defecate. Here, the inner desire is to defecate, and the outside world is placing restrictions on that process. So the nature of this first conflict with authority can determine the child's future relationship with all forms of authority. Early or harsh potty training can lead the child to becoming an anal retentive, or having an anal retentive personality, who hates mess, is obsessively tidy, punctual, and respectful of authority. They can be stubborn and tight-fisted with their cash, as well as their possessions. This is all related to the pleasure got from holding on to their feces when toddlers and their mums, then insisting that they get rid of it by placing them on a potty until they perform. The opposite of an anal retentive individual is an anal expulsive individual. Compared to the anal retentive who underwent harsh toilet training, the anal expulsive went through quite a liberal and easygoing training regimen to learn how to use the toilet. So in adulthood, the anal expulsive person is the person who wants to share things with you. They like giving things away. In essence, they are sharing their feces. An anal expulsive personality is also messy, disorganized, and somewhat rebellious. The next stage is the phallic stage, which occurs from age 3 to age 6. And the focus of the phallic stage centers upon their genitalia as their erogenous zone. So when the child becomes aware of anatomical sex differences, which sets in motion the conflict between erotic attraction, resentment, rivalry, jealousy, and fear, which Freud called the Oedipus complex in boys and the Electra complex in girls. This is resolved through the process of identification, which involves the child adopting the characteristics of the same sex parent. After the phallic stage is the latency stage, which goes from age 6 to puberty. And the latency stage is the fourth stage of psychosexual development, and during this stage the libido is dormant and no further psychosexual development takes place. Freud thought that most sexual impulses are repressed during the latent stage, and sexual energy can be sublimated towards schoolwork, hobbies, and friendships. Much of a child's energy is channeled into developing new skills and acquiring new knowledge, and play becomes largely confined to other children of the same gender, so that identification and realization of differences between girls and boys, or male and female, is kind of relegated to the backstage during this latency phase. The final stage is the genital stage, which goes from puberty to adulthood, and is the last stage of Freud's psychosexual theory of personality development. It is a time of adolescent sexual experimentation, the successful resolution of which is sitting down into a loving one-to-one relationship with another person in our 20s. Again, this is according to Freud. Sexual instinct is directed to heterosexual pleasure, rather than self-pleasure like during the phallic stage. For Freud, the proper outlet of sexual instinct in adults was through heterosexual intercourse. Of course, you got to put Freud in the time period in which this happened, so almost 150 years ago. Fixation and conflict may prevent this, with the consequence that sexual perversions may develop. For instance, a fixation at the oral stage may result in a person getting sexual pleasure primarily from kissing and oral sex, rather than sexual intercourse. And likewise for the anal and other stages. Some people do not seem to be able to leave one stage and proceed on to the next. One reason for this may be that the needs of the developing individual at any particular stage may not have been adequately met, in which case there is a frustration, or possibly the person's needs may have been so well satisfied that they are reluctant to leave the psychological benefits of a particular stage in which there is overindulgence. Both frustration and overindulgence, or any combination of the two, may lead to what psychoanalysts call a fixation at a particular psychosexual stage. Fixation refers to the theoretical notion that a portion of the individual's libido has been permanently invested in a particular stage of their development. And that's it for this video. I'll be interested to hear what everyone thinks about the psychosexual stages of development and how they fit in today's world. It'll be great to get people's thoughts on that. And as always, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, remember to drop a like and subscribe. Until next time.